Hey there, my name is Alex, I am the Silver Mont. This video, Mechwarrior 5 Mercenaries. Fair warning, whilst this review isn't sponsored, it is a little bit rambling. I played the game on PC via the Xbox Game Pass. As for my prior experience with Mechwarrior, a franchise that's almost as old as I am, I very briefly played Mechwarrior 2, perhaps, 20 some years ago. In other words, I have no realistic experience with the franchise whatsoever. Mechwarrior, as it happens though, is part of the Battletech franchise, which has been around since the mid-80s, I believe. So what is Mechwarrior 5? It's a giant robot game. Now, if you ask me, giant robots work on a scale from realistic to anime. And when I say realistic, that's as realistic as a giant mech can be, because fundamentally they aren't realistic at all. Whether it's Pacific Rim or Metal Gear or Mechwarrior, the advantages the giant robots would have are realistically non-existent, but that's not the point. Because the point is, giant robots are cool. But on the far end of the scale, you have things like Gurren Lagann, where realism is not even a suggestion, but openly mocked, with robots able to scale up to, well, a near infinite scale, just because they can. Either way, if you were to ask me where on the scale I enjoy giant robots, it would probably be somewhere in the middle, but weighed a little more towards the anime side. My favourite mech games are Zone of the Enders and Demon X Machina, where the size is there, the huge weapons are there, the awesome looking robots are there, but they can also fly and ignore the rules of physics. Mechwarrior is a lot more grounded. That said, I expected Mechwarrior 5 to be a lot more hardcore than it is. The controls took a bit of getting used to, but I quickly got the hang of them and I was expecting them to be a lot more convoluted. In essence, you set your forward momentum of your mech, and then it will continue at that speed even if you're not touching the keyboard or your gamepad. It will keep going until you slow it down, and whilst it's moving you can rotate the upper half of your mech from side to side. You can compare it to tank controls, in a way, from the old Resident Evil games, I suppose. You can set yourself in a forward march and then just turn left and right to shoot your targets. On a gamepad, your various weapons are mapped to the shoulder buttons. These adjustable lock-on or aim assist, and some mechs are capable of jumping with jump jets, which allows them to briefly hover. But movement is slow and methodical for the most part. Even the smallest, most agile of mechs aren't going to be anywhere in the same galaxy as Jehuti's wasp-like motions. That's not a knock against the game though, I'm just trying to give you a comparison if you have played Zone of the Enders, for example. The mechs themselves are of course the stars of the show, and there's a large number of mechs, split across weight classes, light, medium, heavy, and assault. You could think of assault as super heavy. The game starts you off with access to the lighter and more common mechs, whilst you'll gradually find more of the heavier and extreme mechs as you progress through the game. I will say that I only really started to get more into the game as the selection opened up. Whilst I understand the importance of progression, I like to have options right away, because I think a big part of a game like this is just finding your favourite sort of mech and sticking with it, customizing it as you go. At least, it is for me. That's one thing I always liked about Dark Souls. I like that you can get a majority of the weapons and armors very early into the game. But that is perhaps the crux of the matter. In a nutshell, I think Mechwarrior 5 is a really good game. It's just not really catered for me. And there's nothing wrong with that, of course. There's no false advertising going on. I didn't grab this game thinking that it was something it was not. I grabbed it thinking, it's free on the Game Pass, it might be interesting, although I imagine it's probably not really my kind of game, but I like to keep an open mind, you know? There's a huge level of polish and care put into aspects of the game, to my eye. Now, of course, Mechwarrior savants may point out how the game is rubbish compared to Mechwarrior 4 or 3, or, you know. My perspective is that of a beginner. That is one of the reasons I found this game so interesting to review. It isn't often I review games that I can appreciate more than I can enjoy, if that makes sense. But That's the thing with Mechwarrior. This clearly isn't a game designed for someone like me, but I can appreciate all of the little things and care that has been put into the game. There's the option to play in cockpit, first person view, or third person, and you can enable a setting that automatically swaps it to third person every time a mission starts, for example. And there's a lot of other little customization options in that style that show you the developers' thought about the player and quality of life and such. Whilst downloading the game, I expected the controls would be really complicated and overwhelming, so I went with a gamepad to play with, figuring that would be less complex. I don't have a control or a flight stick, joystick, whatever, because that's probably the best way to play something like this, but to my surprise, the controls are very intuitive and well designed. They're very easy to get the hang of. Same with controlling the mechs. It might feel a little strange at first if you're not used to it, but there's nothing wrong with it, just like Resident Evil 5, which has a great control scheme. It's not exactly standard when the game came out, but once you get used to it, and it is intuitive, it makes perfect sense and controls just right. Likewise, I imagined that customizing and maintaining the mechs in Mechwarrior would be really in-depth, like, I don't know, pressure levels of fluids and managing hydraulics. I don't know why I had that in my mind. There was going to be like some insanely complicated process, but well, it's not. Certainly during battle your limbs and parts can be damaged and even destroyed, needing you to repair them and replace weapons entirely, but equipping and maintaining your mech is done in just about the easiest and simplest way it can be done. There's only one or two improvements that I could possibly really imagine them making, such as, well, the option is missing to automatically refit and repair damaged and destroyed weapons with one button press. See, that's a small quality of life thing that would be nice, but even without it, you make do. Every mech has its own unique setup too. For example, one mech might be able to equip 2 large energy weapons onto its arms, whereas another mech might have no weapons on its arms at all, but it might have a missile launcher on its head and a missile launcher on its chest. So it's all about finding the mech that suits your playstyle. Of course, larger mechs are larger so they can equip more and larger weapons. They can have more armor. In exchange for this, they are much slower. This to me makes the ultra-heavy assault mechs the most desirable. I enjoy the idea of having many weapons. Speed is nice, but more guns, more dakka. Smaller, agile mechs definitely have their place. They are harder to master, I would say, but they definitely can do a lot of work, zipping in and out and harassing larger mechs with their superior speed. Range is very important in this game, so if you see a mech who has only long-range weapons and you have close-range machine guns, if you're a small one, you can roll up on him and then just unload. And keep in mind, this game is often squad-oriented, rarely is it one-on-one combat, so that means every mech has a role to play. You can also customize your mech with paint jobs and the like, but I do find the visual customization a little lacking compared to something like Demon X Machina, but it's definitely adequate. But how do you get mechs? What is the story like? How is multiplayer? Let's unpack those questions. When you start up Mechwarrior, you will create a campaign. You can have 4 players in this campaign, but co-op isn't exactly drop in, drop out, even though they do drop in and out. If you have your game and I join, I don't bring my pilots and my mechs in there. I have to use your mechs, your pilots. And if you join my campaign, you're going to have to use my mechs, my pilots. You won't really be able to buy things unless you're the host as well, but you can maintain your own mech and replace weapons and parts. Whilst at first this seemed really odd and potentially off-putting, I will say that it's not been much of a problem if you intend on only playing the game co-op. My friends and I, we have it on Game Pass, so it's ideal for us. We're all playing together and we're only playing together. If 2 of us are playing and the 3rd and the 4th aren't there, I can still bring the other 2 pilots along as AI squad mates. Think of it a bit like a D&D campaign. You only play when you're all together. You don't take it home with you and progress individually. But it is important to make note of how this co-op works, as it's a little unusual from how most co-op games work. It's all saved in the host's world. So when you're the host, you're going to need to ask your friends or whoever you're playing with, what mech do you want, what pilots do you want, and there's going to be some communication there, but we've not had any real issues with it. In fact, it's a little bit like Divinity 2's co-op if you've played that game. How about the gameplay? Well, hopefully the video up to this point has given you a rough idea there. But the campaign style actually reminds me a little of Mount and Blade, or Total War Warhammer, funnily enough. You have a huge galaxy map made up of hundreds of nodes, each representing a planet. Most of these planets will have missions on for you. You can farm these out for money, parts, mechs, reputation, whatever. See, the galaxy map is divided into factions too, each having their own territory. Let's say Faction A and Faction B are fighting each other as they share borders. If you take missions for Faction A, you'll gain standing with them, whilst losing it with Faction B, as you're actively slaughtering them during the mission. You're a merc though, so you can decide who to work with or who not to work with. Our take on it was, well, we'll try and rep up with a few factions who are nowhere near each other, so they aren't likely to have a lot of conflict. Repping up with a faction allows you to get discounts from stores in their territories, also gives you more negotiation points. What are negotiation points, you ask? Every time you start a mission, the faction will give you a payout reward. But you can increase this with your negotiation points. The higher your rep, the more points you can spend. You can put the points into higher money payout, damage insurance, or salvage. At the end of every mission, you have a choice of what items, weapons, mechs, and such to salvage. For example, if you destroyed an enemy mech in the mission, there might be a chance for you to salvage it. But there's a limit on how much you can salvage, so that's what you use your negotiation points for. You can put more salvage in. I don't know if it's ideal or not, but me and my friends just put all our points into salvage almost every time, so we could grab as much as we could, and you can always sell what you salvage, after all. And the negotiation points are for every individual mission. It's not like you have a bank of them that you have to spend, it's more like for every mission you have X number of points and you can use them as you see fit. Or you could say they regenerate between every mission. The map is also divided into conflict zones, where it costs more and takes longer to repair your mechs, and industrial hubs, that are safe areas where you can buy new items, such as mechs and even recruit pilots. Your pilots level up, they can be injured and they can die permanently, but there's always more to replace them. In multiplayer, as mentioned, everyone needs their own pilot, and you can bring 4 into a mission at once, and that can be any combination of humans and bots. But every mech count towards the mission tonnage limit, so at least earlier on, you might have issues if you're playing with 4 people and you all want to be heavy mechs, because the mission might have a limit on weight, meaning you're going to have to bring some lighter ones. The AI can be given basic commands, and it was usually worth bringing them as I found them to do a decent enough job in helping out, and not always getting all my stuff blown up in the process. Story progression is made by doing enough generic missions to increase your overall reputation and renown level, letting you take on more important and bigger jobs, including story ones. And the story itself is, well, not great, to be honest. Fairly generic and lackluster, but far from the focal point of the game, in my opinion. And much like Mount and Blade campaigns, it's very easy to spend an entire day in Mechwarrior and lose track of the time, because there is a lot of time you can put into this game. I was actually expecting some sort of 5 or 6 hour campaign and then maybe like multiplayer modes when I started it up, so well, that's not at all what I got. There's plenty here to keep you coming back. I would estimate the campaign's probably 30 to 40 hours, but you could play this for hundreds of hours, really. It's quite open-ended like that. There's plenty here to keep you coming back for more, if you're sucked into the loop of mech combat and getting new mechs and upgrading them. How about the combat though? Whilst you fight other mechs, there will be enemy tanks and helicopters, and missions vary from defend building to destroy building. My favourite is you can just walk through them, to, things like assassination and various other game types. Most of them are fairly like for like, and repetition could set in if you don't enjoy the basic gameplay. As for mechs, you can break their gameplay generally into close, medium, and long range types. There's a lot of different weapons too. You can combine long range and close range, or focus on one area as you so choose. For example, I feel like faster, smaller mechs might benefit more from close to medium range, allowing you to dip in, get real close to a slower, longer range mech and melt them with flamethrowers before running away, sort of hit and run, playing the distraction game. There's nice sort of synergy, like you'd find in, say, Titanfall 2. A Scorch that gets the drop on someone at close range can really tear them up. But a Scorch that's trying to just walk across the map into a backpedaling tone, well, they're just going to eat a lot of missiles to the face and probably not achieve very much. Weapon-wise though, there's energy weapons, such as lasers which don't need any ammo but build up more heat, ballistic weapons such as machine guns and autocannons and rifles kind of being my favourite along with missiles. And, well, yes, there's missile launchers which come in all sorts of flavours. Long-range homing missiles, short-range cluster missiles. There's something for everyone here. Me, I'm all about things like railguns on mechs, Gauss cannons, and the occasional laser gun. At the end of the day, I was very pleasantly surprised by Mechwarrior. It isn't an ultra-high budget game, that shows. The graphics aren't bad, but they aren't mind-blowing. The game's performance was fine for me, and we didn't experience any severe glitches or bugs, to my knowledge. It felt very polished and very in touch with what its players want and expect. A very solid experience, just as noted, perhaps not one specifically catered to me, but nothing wrong with that. The more I played it, the more it won me over. The heavy, industrial, and low-tech sci-fi feel has a lot of appeal for the right person. In a way, similar to Titanfall, which I'm sure was inspired by Mechwarrior when it comes to the setting as well as, the mechs. And as Titanfall 3 doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon, or perhaps ever, Mechwarrior makes a nice stand-in, although they are very different games. But yes, Mechwarrior gets a thumbs up from me, and if you're into mechs, give it a shot. Likewise, Demon X Machina and Titanfall 2 are some great mech games. Now, if we could just get a new Armored Core game on PC for me to try out. But until then, you guys take care. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you real soon.